No Victocrats allowed. Why? Because we've got a country to save. Join me, Larry Elder, tonight starting at 7 on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So, Priebus out and Homeland Security Secretary General John Kelly, now the White House Chief of Staff. Here's how Donald Trump addressed it on the tarmac as he was
pouring out.
Yeah, he was go to his home base of Long Island to give a speech at community college about law enforcement, particularly border enforcement. Here's what Trump said about the two men, Kelly and Priebus.
Mr. President, why Secretary Kelly? Why John Kelly?
Reince is a good man. John Kelly will do a fantastic job. General Kelly has been a star, done an incredible job thus far, respected by everybody. A great, great American. Reince Priebus, a good man. Thank you very much.
And he was holding his own umbrella. Did you notice that?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Oh, I thought that was great. His own man.
Yeah.
Takes care of his own business.
Okay, I guess if that symbolism is important to you, I guess then that's the right symbolism. Priebus gave his first interview to Wolf Blitzer on CNN, and he talked about still being on Team Trump. He was very, I would say, classy and professional in explaining what had transpired.
I've always said to him, and he always agreed with me, anytime either one of us think that we need to make a change or move in a different direction, let's just talk about it and get it done. And so I think the president thought about that, and we talked about it yesterday, and I resigned and he accepted my resignation. But this is about the president. It's about moving his agenda forward. I think he's made a smart decision with General Kelly, and I think he's going to do a great job. And I'm looking forward to the future. One other thing. I'm always going to be a Trump fan. I'm on Team Trump, and I look forward to helping him achieve his goals and his agenda for the American people.
Priebus went on to suggest that Trump's timing to hit the reset button is correct.
The president has a right to hit a reset button. I think it's a good time to hit the reset button. I think he was right to hit the reset button, and I think that it was something that I think the White House needs. I think it's healthy, and I support him in it.
Okay, well that certainly tamps down the controversy.
Well, and he didn't wade into the scuffle between Scaramucci and himself.
Yeah.
You know, he said, I'm not going to do that. You know, the palace intrigue is going to stop now.
The only thing he talked about Bannon, because the question is, does the house cleaning continue? And Steve Bannon, is he next to go? And he said, look, that's Kelly's decision, but I'm a big Steve Bannon fan. He's a genius. He thinks about the Trump agenda and the American people every day. And so, I think he served the president well, and that's a Kelly decision. So you weren't going to trip Priebus up over the weekend in those interviews because he's, a skilled hand at this. For more on the topic and the implications, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Tim Carney, senior political columnist for the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So the question that everybody's asking, so I guess I'll be pedestrian and ask it too, is what are the prospects that General Kelly can tame Operation Chaos in the White House?
Yeah, the Republican congressman told my colleague Phil Wegman at the Examiner that what Kelly's job is to bring adult supervision. That was the exact quote, adult supervision. And the implication of that is that these are a bunch of kids running around the White House. And in a lot of ways, that's what it looks like is happening if you judge it by the consequence. The number of political newbies that are there. You've got Trump, who's brand new to this. You've got Trump's sort of inner circle from New York, Jared Kushner and Ivanka. You've got Gary Cohn, who's a very capable man, but also new to politics. And you've got Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller, who come from sort of the bomb-throwing populist world. And none of these are sort of the experienced political hands. And the point of Priebus was, well, he's been the RNC chairman. He's been a Republican official forever. He was supposed to bring sort of that party establishment stability, but obviously, while maybe being an adult, he didn't provide the supervision that created a sort of disciplined White House.
Well, but
So,
it seems to me the real problem is the principle, and you can't get around that. You can talk about all these people, and I think there's some real gradations in terms of their quality. Steve Miller, from the speeches I've seen him that Trump has given, that he has written, I'm actually pretty impressed. I was skeptical, but I've been pretty impressed by Steve Miller's work product so far. Steve Bannon, not a child. Reince Priebus, not a child. Even some of the family members, to the extent that makes you uncomfortable, they're not children running around. The president, that's a little bit more difficult conversation.
that's exactly right. That nobody can make this be a disciplined, orderly White House as long as Trump behaves the way he has. That when Sean Spicer left, I thought about all the times that the White House press office went out and said something, presumably after making the best efforts to get the president's viewpoint and opinion and take on it. And then the next morning at 6 a.m., President Trump tweets out something that totally undermines and contradicts what was just said. And so if you're going to have a president that behaves that way, there's no way to stay focused. And then what you had, it's not just a question of message discipline or anything like that. It's
So
even just policy discipline. What he did with the transgendered serving in the military, you have a president who tweets out that something's a new policy, but nothing has been set in motion to actually make this be a new policy.
Right. And General Kelly, he's going to have some bizarre personalities, I think, to ring in. But what's his relationship going to be like with congressional members?
So there's a lot of respect on Capitol Hill. Among Republicans, it's almost universal. Among Democrats, there's a lot of criticism because of his, trying to implement President Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration. That is just totally unacceptable in the minds of a lot of liberals. Barbara Lee, the liberal from the San Francisco Bay Area, has said he's totally not acceptable there. He got confirmed as Homeland Security Secretary, and generally most military generals are held in high regard in a sort of bipartisan fashion on the Hill. Maybe Mike Flynn, who was briefly the National Security Advisor, was an exception to that. But Kelly is another one of these. So I think he'll have a good relationship with the majority on the House side, on the whole congressional side, which is the most you can ask for.
And just to that score, I mean, for people who don't know or don't remember, I mean, General Kelly is someone who has lost a son in service to this country. His son was killed when an IED exploded underneath him while serving in Afghanistan. So this is somebody, not just his own professional career and his personal integrity. This is somebody who comes from a family who's paid the ultimate sacrifice in service to this country, and that demands respect too.
No, that's exactly right. And I think this is another place in which Trump has instincts that can be at odds with sort of what the elites in the media and politics sometimes feel, but is right on point with what the public is, which is sometimes we look at it and say, why are there so many generals here? He's put in Flynn and Mattis and Kelly and all these others in multiple jobs, and some people look at it and say, this is kind of creepy. It looks a little like an authoritarian military takeover. On the other hand, I think what Trump feels is these are immensely competent, capable men who know how to carry out tasks and don't care about the politics of it. And I think that's what the American public feels as well. So this isn't, I'm not talking about whether or not this is going to be popular. 99% of the country doesn't care who the White House Chief of Staff is. What I'm talking about is what's Trump's mindset here. And I think it's another reflection of where he has the same viewpoint that most people do, which is that U.S. military leadership is an institution that's still, unlike most other institutions in the country, that still warrant deep respect because of their capability, their honesty, and their hard work.
Yeah, and President Trump always seems to have a soft spot for men in the military, so hopefully he will listen to General Kelly. But what are your sources telling you about who is going to replace General Kelly? Are there any other names being floated around besides Jeff Sessions?
So we've had Jeff Sessions, and of course, that would be a very interesting thing. Would he accept this? It would be almost a demotion from DOJ to Homeland Security, sort of on the hierarchy of the cabinet agencies. DOJ is senior, and it's sort of held in higher regard. And Sessions would have been driven out sort of by an angry president, would he take a new appointment? That's a tough one to imagine. If he wants to tap Capitol Hill, Mike McCall is the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee on the House, Texas Republican. That's one that you hear thrown about. A very controversial one would be Chris Kobach. He's the Secretary of State of Kansas, who's the one who's been leading the voting integrity project, trying to get fraudulent registrations off the rolls. It's not just that project. His whole political career has sort of been a lightning rod in picking fights. So that would be a circus if he nominates Chris Kobach. I'm not suspecting he's going to do Kobach. McCall would sort of be the easy pick. You might imagine a normal president at this point would say, I want to avoid drama. We don't know if Donald Trump wants the drama or not.
Avoiding drama is bad for ratings, so we'll see if he does the double switch from the dugout there. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I'm going to get to the other side here. We covered this story last week, and this story seems to continue to be ratcheting up in importance based on actual evidence being produced, an arrest made, the things that are non-existent in the Russian collusion investigation getting all the ink. Andy McCarthy writes in National Review that the case between that consists of Debbie Wasserman Schultz and her Pakistani IT schemers, that was not limited to the former DNC head, isn't about bank fraud. It seems to be a real conspiracy aimed at undermining American national security. I thought that's what we were so concerned about with the Russians. What about this case with the arrest made last week and all the information coming out about how much this family was paid and the money moving around, and why Wasserman Schultz and Democrats seem to be so uninterested in getting to the bottom of the crime they were, crimes plural, they were ultimately the victims of?
Yeah, and reminder, some of the details about what was going on and the transferring files and stuff like that came out, but Imran Awan, the sort of head guy, stayed on after some of his staffers were fired, this is a question: why? What was going on?
What does he know?
Yeah, well, and so Awan had been working for the Democrats, McCarthy spells this out, for 13 years. So he started as a low-level Hill staffer back in 2004, and then he landed on Wasserman Schultz, and then he sort of, on her staff, and then sort of climbed up with her and made sort of chief of staff pay about the same as a member of Congress, $160,000. And so this was somebody who was deeply embedded in the party. And so the innocent explanation of why Wasserman Schultz is sort of was protecting him could have something to do with sort of like almost just this hopeful fear that, oh, wait, I hope it's not this guy. I hope it's not this guy who's been my ally for over a decade, who was engaged in in A, bank fraud, but B, trying to compromise members of Congress and something deeper going on. I'm not convinced. I think Andrew McCarthy's theory is an interesting one, but I'm not convinced that there's some sort of, it's almost a counterintelligence, espionage story that he's spinning here. But it certainly is a case where I think her sort of incompetence over the years, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, is at a level that all Democrats ought to be ashamed that they kept her for as long. It's not just incompetence; it's time, malevolence, and dishonesty.
Well,
this is another example of it.
Well, but it's not just her, right? Kim Strassel, we talked about this on Friday. Her piece in the Wall Street Journal last week, which was very, who paid for the Fusion GPS phony baloney dossier on Trump? What if we've got this story? What if the D.C. press corps has this story about Russian collusion backwards? Interesting questions.
Yeah, and I think the fact that there's been no there on the Trump side, I have lots of criticism for Donald Jr. taking that meeting. You're not going to sit down with Russian intelligence sources and it come out sort of in your favor. So that was beyond dumb. That was really a culpable stupidity by him. And I think that bringing Paul Manafort into his orbit and Secretary and then General Mike Flynn. I think both of those were sort of inviting these people with these unpleasant Russia ties into his orbit. But that's a Manafort story. That's not a Trump story. On the Trump end, there really isn't. I mean, the idea of collusion almost seems hard to even define now. It's a word that's being thrown out there. But you're right. So now we look at these and the things that Ken Strassel was pointing out, you have to say, was the story working the opposite way than what we suspected? If we're looking for a there, we might have to look at the other end of this whole story.
He is Tim Carney. He's the senior political columnist for the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. Tim, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
I'm Rich Tom.